Слава Україні!
Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone is having a fantastic day. In fact, I hope you've had a fantastic start to your week. I hope that you guys had some wonderful days off. We certainly enjoyed ours. There's been a lot of stuff that's been happening since we've been gone. It seems that we've missed quite a bit while we had our day off. Man, there was a lot of stuff that happened today and yesterday. A lot of it is pretty big. So there's a lot of stuff happening in Ukraine. There's a lot of stuff happening all over the world. You're talking about, I mean, it could only be best described as the four horsemen of the apocalypse, I think, in kind of a cynical way, I guess. But it's a lot of stuff's happening. You got war, you have famine, you have drought, you have pestilence, you have disease. You have all sorts of pretty terrible things happening. A lot of human suffering ongoing throughout the entirety of the world, regardless of what you're talking about. And luckily you guys have allowed us to be the news that gives back. So the big thing about this channel is that we never do super chats. We are never doing anything like that. We're never pushing merchandising. 100% of everything that we're doing is for charities, and just for charities. So if you check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different organizational links. And if you have any more, our Discord's linked down there. Please jump on the Discord, jump into a chat with a staff member, send us a link, send us a short description, and we'll start the vetting process. 80% or more of all the donations that these organizations actually end up receiving actually go to their programs and helping people, which is the most important part of any of these things that we're trying to do. And so if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, then help us grow the channel and spread the word about this project and how we do the news here by giving us a like and subscribing, letting your friends know about us. The whole thing about that is, as cheesy as it sounds to do those things, the fact is that the more people that are here, the more of an impact we will have as a community and trying to give back to the very news stories that we're talking about here on the channel. And so we want to be able to grow. We want to be able to put a fundraiser on every single stream that we do. And the only way we can do that is with your guys' support. And there's been a ton of support from you guys since we started this project, and I can't thank you enough for that. Even more so, I can't thank you enough for the support that you've given to the organizations in the description, which is just absolutely amazing to see. It's amazing to see the community that's been built here, and I can't wait to see where it goes. But there's a ton of stuff happening throughout the world. We're getting ready to move into the news. And so if you have any questions or comments, please direct them at Riley, who is one of the moderators that works here for us on the channel. And I'll be able to actually answer and respond to those comments and questions that you may have throughout the stream, and hopefully answer some of those questions to the best of my ability. A lot of this stuff does get very complicated when it comes to geopolitics and history behind a lot of this stuff and kind of what's going on, technical stuff when it comes to the war. I served in the Marine Corps myself, so I'll be able to kind of answer some of the stuff that's happening here to the very best of my degree, especially when it comes to the war on terror, Middle Eastern relations, and just general knowledge stuff about battlefield tactics and stuff that we're seeing in Ukraine. So hopefully I'll be able to answer some of your questions, but without further ado, we're going to jump right into the news because there is a ton of it tonight. And of course, we start off with our special report, which is in Ukraine, and this has been ongoing since the 24th of February. This long war, which has begun, is the worst war in Europe since the end of World War II. The Russians don't seem to think so. They seem to think Yugoslavia is a bigger deal, but Yugoslavia is more infighting than anything. This is two industrial nations fighting each other now. And what we see here is actually we start here in Lviv with a little bit of interesting news. One of the sources that we follow, his name is James Vasquez. He's an American Foreign Legion member, and he went back to the United States after serving some time here in Ukraine. And then he sold everything in his house. He sold his house, and then he packed up what he needed, and he went back to Ukraine. And with the help of a foundation, he's actually gotten a bunch of optics. So Ripley's Heroes Foundation got the money and bought and donated a bunch of sights for volunteers here at the front lines. Every little advantage you can give, even your basic infantrymen. Artillery isn't going to win this war, even though that's what's most highly talked about. Air power isn't going to win this war. What's going to win this war and what can take and hold ground is that infantryman. And any advantage you can give them is going to be beneficial. And so they gave them a ton of sites that he's taking with him to his unit here on the front lines. So here in Lviv is where where we're going to guess and say he has arrived at, and he's on his way to his unit right now. He's very passionate because his mother was one of the last members of his grandmother was one of the last members of her family, or the last member of her family, after the Soviet Union executed her entire family. So he's very passionate about this kind of stuff, and he's very passionate about what's happening in Ukraine because his family knows personally the brutality of what the Russians are willing to do to people that they have under their control. And one of the things about the sites that they're getting is there's been a lot of talk lately about stuff getting to the black market. And a lot of this is perpetuated by Russia. It's not nearly as big of a deal as you might think it is, or as Russia definitely seems to make it out to be, but the precautions are being taken nonetheless. And one of the things we see here is the fact that they are laser engraving the sites, the metal pieces for these sites, in order to show that these are not for sale, these are for Ukraine. Then if you're trying to sell this is on the black market, and therefore very easily caught.
This is great. Perfect. Outstanding.
So very fantastic to see that that's what's happening there. But we move into Kyiv next, and actually up into Bucha first. The Washington Post has actually released an independent report regarding Bucha. They did an independent investigative report. Washington Post, of course, is another news organization, very widely known one. But they launched their own investigative report into Bucha, and one of the things that they have stated is, quote, 458 bodies, of which 419 bore markings that they'd been shot, tortured, or bludgeoned to death. And if you want to actually read into some of that report, a lot of this stuff is stuff that we've already covered, and it's rather horrific. So I do recommend that if you are not accustomed to understanding the levels of violence and brutality that you may be reading about in some detail, that you may want to take it really slow or not view this article at all, just out of for your mental sake. But it's very in-depth. It's very well done. We've already seen similar reports from the OSCE, which has already released its preliminary report under the Moscow Accords. And we are waiting to see other organizations. This is the International Criminal Court, which is ongoing with investigations, and other third-party nations, which are ongoing with investigations as well, to release their reports, as well as the United Nations. But Kyiv has had 5 major developments thus far. Several of them larger than others, some of them updates. So the first thing that we have here is that new toys have arrived here in Ukraine. So this is the BMC Kirpi. The Kirpi is an MRAP variant that is produced by Turkey. They build these. These are the ones that they use with their own armed forces. These have been shipped over to Ukraine. They got the first batch of them, and there's going to be another delivery of 150 units expected here soon. And this is coming from the operational group Kakovka of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, and we can actually see them showing off some of their new toys here.
Вот такие симпатичные машинки. 450 штук. Уже поехала на передок.
So the cool thing about these things is we've seen them have HIMARS and M113s and all sorts of things, BMPs, BMDs, all sorts of armored personnel carriers that they've been given, or vehicles that they've been given. The cool thing about these and other MRAPs that they have been given by other nations is that this has a V-shaped bottom hull. And what that means is, with something like the Humvee, you have a very flat bottom to it. But if you can see here, you see that angle in the bottom of this hull. When something explodes underneath you, like a mine or an IED, it explodes and it hits a flat bottom. And what that does is there is no place for that explosion to go. So it busts through the bottom of the hull, and it goes inside of the crew compartment, and it basically turns like Humvees and stuff into absolutely horrendous wrecks. And it's just terrible to see. If you want an idea, you can look up pictures of destroyed Humvees from the Iraq War. It's just pretty terrible and very low crew survivability. MRAPs do something completely different. As I pointed out here, you can see the V shape starting to take place in this hull. And what that does is when the explosion happens underneath the vehicle, it hits this V, and instead of pushing its way and forcing its way through the flat bottom, it's displaced and it goes out the sides of the vehicle. And that displaces, I believe it's up to 90% of the actual explosive force of a landmine or an IED underneath the vehicle. And that allows for crew survivability at pretty phenomenal rates, even with larger explosives. So it's very, very good. It's very, very good. And to see these are also much better armored. They have a better chassis for that armor. A lot of the armor on the Humvees, the vehicles weren't originally built with that intent, and their up armor packages actually weigh down the suspension and caused a lot of breakdowns and issues that the U.S. has been kind of dealing with ad hocly for years. There are good and bad with both vehicles. The Humvee is a phenomenal military utility vehicle, but these MRAPs, they have better armor, better protection all around, and better crew survivability, and it's great to see that Ukraine's going to be getting plenty of these. As we continue here, we see more. We talked about crimes against humanity quite significantly, and once again, we get an update from the Prosecutor General's office here in Kyiv, and they say, quote, "Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian troops have committed 27,203 war crimes against Ukraine and its citizens." When you're talking about war crimes are perpetuated by both sides of the war. Any war is going to have that occur. That's, as much as I hate to say it, it's essentially impossible to completely prevent. Some military is better than others. And the thing is that even the U.S. has committed war crimes. So I have no problem admitting that. The Haditha massacre was a terrible example of war crime. But the level and scale of war crimes committed inside of Ukraine is quite unprecedented since times like the Holocaust of World War II. That's probably the only example that would overshadow the perpetual war crimes in Ukraine, just because you're talking about millions of individuals. But millions of individuals are affected by this war as well, and by these war crimes. There's not a single person in the entirety of Ukraine that has not been affected personally by this war on some level, whether that's a loss or injury of a family member or a friend or somebody or a neighbor or somebody that they know. This war has been utterly devastating. And it's not. Someone had asked in an earlier stream, and I tried to explain it as best I could. They said, "Is it ordered by the Russians to do these things?" And personally, I do not believe it is. I believe it's a lack of orders. It's a lack of preventative measures and a lack of accountability. You have as a lawful. You have as someone in a moderate military force, you have a lawful responsibility to not follow unlawful orders. So if it was perpetuated, if it was ordered to conduct these atrocities, such as shelling, indiscriminate shelling, you could label as being ordered to have done so and following said order. But a lot of the torture and rapes and pillaging and things like this, it's a lack of accountability. There are no real rules of engagement for Russian forces, something that even when time had precedence on mission, we would receive rules of engagement briefs before we could go and deploy, where we needed to go. And that kind of thing is meant to limit war crimes and tell you what you can and cannot do as in regards to your situation. And we're not seeing that with the Russians. We're seeing a full total war and a full scorched earth policy. So it's almost unprecedented, the level of destruction that has been brought on Ukraine. Something that would have taken years in the 20th century has been boiled down to weeks and months here. That's not the only thing. Missing children is a big issue and has been more vocalized, I would say, in the last couple of weeks. There was not a lot talked about missing children. Child casualties, certainly we've been getting updates on that almost every single day, but missing children, not so much. But it is reported, according to the press service, the Ukrainian Parliamentary Commission for Human Rights, that, quote, as of August the 8th, 208 Ukrainian children are reported missing at this period of time, whether they are legitimately just missing, they've been abducted, they have been they have forcibly been deported, so abducted, whether they have been killed in action, or killed in action, but whether they have been killed or they are currently, also been killed or underneath rubble, or they are missing underneath rubble at this point in time, we just don't know. But that is unfortunately the fact of reality is children too are very heavily affected by this. Over 700 children alone have been wounded during this war, and most of that being in the Donetsk Oblast. There has been a $4.5 billion USD grant given to Ukraine by the World Bank. They signed the agreement to provide this grant to Ukraine, and the U.S. government is allocating those funds. So $4.5 billion going to Ukraine, and it is a grant. Grants are not something that you pay back. It's not a loan where it has interest and you have to pay this back. No, they are just going to give Ukraine $4.5 billion. The details of the allocation, we don't know at this point, but the press service, but that's all coming from the press service of the Ukrainian Ministry of Finance. So that's a big influx of money for them, and that's the money that can be put towards reconstruction, humanitarian aid, the war effort, whatever they really need it for. So that's good to see that they're getting those allocations, and they've gotten more as well, which we'll get into later. But a big question has been asked over and over and over again, and that is, what does Ukraine consider victory? And this question has been answered. We now have an answer of what is victory for Ukraine. What does victory look like in this war for Ukraine? And that answer is, and the big question was, does it involve Crimea? Well, according to President Zelensky himself, quote, this Russian war against Ukraine and against the entire free Europe began with Crimea and must end with Crimea. And we actually have, so we actually have that video, and I'm actually going to show the first part of that video here for you today.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Сьогодні багато уваги до тематики Криму. І це правильно, бо Крим український, і ми ніколи від нього не відмовимось. Ми не забудемо, що саме з окупації Криму почалась російська війна проти України. Росія перетворила наш півострів, який завжди був і буде одним з найкращих місць у Європі, на одне з найбільш небезпечних місць в Європі. Росія принесла в Крим масштабні репресії, екологічні проблеми, економічну безвихідь і війну. Можливо, історики колись визначать, скільки людей було вбито через використання Росією Криму для терору. Десятки тисяч, сотні тисяч. Від України і Грузії до Сирії і більш віддалених регіонів. Присутність російських окупантів в Криму – це загроза для усієї Європи і для глобальної стабільності. Не може бути безпечним Чорноморський регіон, поки Крим окупований. Не буде стабільного і довготривалого миру і у багатьох країнах на узбережжі Середземного моря, поки Росія має змогу використовувати наш півострів як свою військову базу. Ця російська війна проти України і проти всієї вільної Європи почалась з Криму і має закінчитись Кримом, його звільненням.
So that is something that has really turned a lot of people's minds. It's something that has really been churning in a lot of people's heads. What is the victory? What does Ukraine looking to do? And it looks like the confidence that the support that Ukraine has been getting, the amount of supplies and training and equipment that they have gotten, and the advanced weaponry that they have gotten that is really making a huge impact on the battlefield, is allowing them to think at this point that taking Crimea back is a very real possibility for them, and they would be able to do so and successfully do so. And so this answers what is victory for Ukraine. And I know that this is something that's been asked before here on the channel, and I know this is something that we tried saying, it could involve Crimea. It could involve retaking, Ukraine back and consolidating its holding in Ukraine once again for the first time since 2014, which is fantastic to finally have an answer for that in a definitive way. So it started in Crimea, and it will end in Crimea with its liberation. And that brings us into the Kharkiv Oblast, and as we start really moving into the main part of this war now, and what we start seeing is that Kharkiv has had an immense amount of activity over the last couple of days, a lot more than usual. Of course, Kharkiv is under continuous shelling using S-300 and S-400 batteries, as well as Iskander-M missile batteries, all of which are either in or around the Russian city of Belgorod, Russia, which is just across the border from the Kharkiv Oblast. Russia no longer has any conventional artillery that they can fire into the city of Kharkiv, or really within most of its region right now, just because they have been pushed so far back by Ukrainian forces that they're no longer within range. Your Grad systems, your DPK-30s, anything that they're using standard artillery, 2S3s, 2S1s, they don't have these things available to them within range to actually strike the city of Kharkiv. But there have been several developments. First of all, the dead have been tallied thus far for the Kharkiv Oblast, and according to Alexander Filchakov, who is the head of the Kharkiv Regional Prosecutor's Office, he has stated, quote, "Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian aggressors have killed more than 1,000 Ukrainian civilians, including 50 children in the Kharkiv region." So the dead are starting to be tallied up all over. We haven't heard anything out of Sumy or Chernihiv at this point regarding the amount of dead that they have found. I'm sure that they are going to be finding quite a bit, as there is an immense amount of fighting taking place. But Kharkiv is finally starting to tally up that and releasing some statements for us to kind of understand the gravity of the destruction and the death that has occurred here just in this one oblast. There are thousands of civilians that have been killed, tens of thousands of civilians that have been killed all throughout the country, and we see a lot of that here in Kharkiv, which has seen some of the most brutal fighting since the beginning of the invasion back in February. Destroyed homes and infrastructure play a lot into that. Quite a bit of very critical infrastructure, whether you're talking about gas or you're talking about gas, electricity, you're talking about water. All of that has been destroyed and shelled at some point or another, or is currently being shelled and bombed as we speak. And here, this is Krylo Tomashenko, who's the head of the deputy head of the president's office for Ukraine, and he said, quote, "Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian occupiers have damaged about 10,297 objects of critical infrastructure and housing stock in the Kharkiv region." Housing stock meaning people's homes, where people live and grow their families and rest and try and rest easy at the end of the day, or they're supposed to be in a safe place, and that just seems to have been the idea of that has completely been wiped away if you're within the Kharkiv Oblast. Immense shelling has hit the Kharkiv area as well over the last few days. Russian forces have seemed to intensify the fighting within the Kharkiv Oblast and all of its holdings. So this is the first quote. This comes from Yevgeny Yanin, who is the first deputy minister of internal affairs for Ukraine, and they have said, quote, "Over the past day, Russian aggressors shelled 42 settlements in Ukraine and destroyed 10 hectares of wheat in the Kharkiv region." Once again, it's currently that season where we are now moving into where the harvest is happening for that spring grain that came in. And so this is the first of two harvests that will occur for any growing seasons. The winter wheat harvest will be getting sowed soon. But this shelling is causing widespread fires in open fields, and this stuff is now ready for harvest. It's dry, it's ready to go. All it's waiting for is a combine, but that means it's extremely flammable. So anytime a shell is hitting into one of these wheat fields, it's destroying hundreds of acres of land with a fire, a massive fire that essentially is going to burn down those entire fields. And we have seen entire fields wiped off the face of the earth. That is grain that will never be harvested. That is entire livelihoods destroyed, and that is hundreds of people that are going to starve because they did not receive that grain at some point. Because as we have heard from the UN themselves, the UN's World Food Program, 50%, estimated 50% of all of their food that they give for humanitarian aid with the World Food Program comes from Ukraine. So it's a very devastating blow. Another quote, this one coming from Ole Subinov, who's the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration, said, quote, rocket attacks on the Kharkiv region on August the 8th. 1 person was killed, 5 citizens were injured. Local residential buildings, objects of transport, and critical infrastructure were damaged. A fire broke out in a local wheat field, but was extinguished soon. So they are trying to extinguish these things, but once again, it's a very fast-moving fire. There's not a lot of time or opportunity because it's ready for harvest. It's already dry. It's very flammable. But the Ukrainians did hit back, and as we can see here, another depot has been destroyed. Quote, the Armed Forces of Ukraine destroyed a Russian ammunition depot in the Kharkiv region on August the 8th. And that's coming from the press service of the Eastern Operational Territory Command of the National Guard of Ukraine. So there is fighting on both sides. A lot of times we will not hear a lot from the Ukrainians when the active operations are ongoing, just because everyone wants to show where the Russians are. Everyone at this point in time can really say with some pretty good moral high ground that the Russians are the bad guys in this, and everyone wants to show, especially those under occupation, where are the Russians at. It's an information gold mine right now because everybody has a phone, and every one of those phones have internet uplink and have a camera. And so if you are working with intelligence, this is an absolute gold mine of a war. This is the most well documented war in human history, and that is something that cannot be understated. So a lot of times they're showing where Russian forces are, Russian troops on the move, trucks moving, supplies being hauled in, railroads, troops operating in areas. But when it comes to Ukrainians, they don't want to show what they're doing because that puts their own guys in danger. And so we're not going to see a whole lot of first-person action coming out of the Kharkiv Oblast until after the fact. So just keep that in mind. We kind of have to rely on a lot of statements here. But that starts to really bring us down here into the Donbass, and we really start getting into the Donetsk, Luhansk, and so on and so forth, as we start getting really into the meat and potatoes of the war, which is where all of the action's ongoing. Now, of course, we get the daily updates from Donetsk, and this couple of times it has been actually from the Prosecutor General's office as opposed to Pavlo Korolenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. It seems that he may be doing something rather important at this point, so it's actually coming from the Prosecutor General's office. But they've maintained the statements. These are 24 hours after the events that they report on, so it is a delay of 24 hours in each of these, so keep that in mind. Quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on August the 7th. 5 people were killed and 17 citizens were injured. Additionally, quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on August 8th. 3 people were killed and 19 citizens were injured. JL says each ammo depot destroyed is hundreds or thousands of line stays. Always happy to see when those blow up. Yes, 100%. It's with Russia, it's a scorched earth policy, and we're actually getting ready to get into some of this. It's a scorched earth policy. Artillery usage, they are firing 10 times more artillery than Ukraine can bring to bear. That is the reality when it comes to just sheer statistics. Russia has a very heavy reliance on artillery. They have for some time. They maintain massive stockpiles, but those lengthening of logistical lines is really to the point where Russia's logistics are under a complete collapse at this point. They are unable to maintain rates of fire because they don't have ammunition staged for them and easily brought to their batteries. They're not able to maintain a sustained rate of fire that they were just nothing but a couple weeks ago. The introduction of HIMARS and longer range artillery for the Ukrainians has made a significant difference in the battlefield, and we're seeing the ramifications of that. Just take a look at at NASA's firm fire map. They track fires all across the world, and you can just see the difference between what it was just a few weeks ago as opposed to what it is like now, and it is very much subsided due to the destruction of these ammo depots. A lot of people's lives have been saved because these have been destroyed, because the artillery guns simply cannot fire down onto their cities. That doesn't mean Russia isn't trying, though. As we have brought up, there is a pretty big offensive ongoing within the Bakhmut, Soledar, and Toretsk area. So this is one of the main axes of advance for the Russian forces, and we've seen everything that we needed to really determine that this is a major offensive. We've seen the precursor bombardments, which continue still, as Russian forces have not reached any of these cities to take them in full. But we also see probing attacks which have occurred, which were happening for some time, and the Ukrainians, declared all of these attacks victories, all of these offensives victories. These are smaller probing attacks, company-sized level attacks that were ongoing against the lines, mostly in Soledar and Bakhmut. And then now we see much heavier fighting and much heavier shelling with a large troop surge into this region, which we've covered before. Now we're continuing to see where the massive use of artillery, it's really kind of almost a rolling barrage is kind of the methodology behind this, even though it's not quite what it was for World War I. The Russians are keeping artillery ahead of them and really trying to flatten everything in their ground troops' path, and so that way they can continue moving forward with relative ease, quote unquote. But it's not really working out too well for them. They have encountered very stiff resistance from Ukrainians in this area. But the heavy shelling of Avdiivka, Chasiv Yar, Toretsk, Bakhmut, and Soledar have led to the deaths and maiming of many civilians. Part of the ongoing offensive within this, because this is a main axis of Russian advance. And we actually get some of this from Ukraine itself. So these are several civilians that were wounded here after shelling has hit their villages. 10 settlements within this region were actually hit in succession, and that did include a school which has been completely destroyed, as well as transportation facilities. And what they're actually saying here in Ukrainian is that, hey, don't go off of known paths. Do not stay on main roads and stay within these territories, because as you can see here, the Russians are actually firing on civilian vehicles, according to the Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs. Popasna, which was completely leveled by the Russian forces when they were originally attacking during the Donbass campaign, is not going to be rebuilt. And this is coming from the head of the Luhansk People's Republics, which is the self-declared republic within the region. And this is, the head's name is Leonid Pasechnik. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with pronunciation. Anyway, Popasna will not, quote, Popasna will not be rebuilt. It's almost completely destroyed. So there's no hope for Popasna, and you can see some of that there. Popasna has been completely destroyed. We had covered that when it first happened, but the level of destruction of Popasna is quite significant. It would be, while it is a smaller city than, say, Mariupol, it's on a similar term of destruction. Mariupol, 90% of the buildings in Mariupol are no longer structurally sound, and will, if they have not collapsed already, will have to be demolished and completely rebuilt. Popasna is pretty similar in that most of the buildings here are no longer structurally sound, and if they are not totally wiped off the face of the earth, they have to be demolished and rebuilt completely. And the LPR is now saying if they maintain control of this territory, they will not be rebuilding this city. And new toys are raining fire on Russian forces. These are Polish AHS Crabs, which are a type of self-propelled artillery. It's 155 millimeter artillery guns, much like the M109 Paladin, which is heavily utilized by the U.S. military. They are, or the PHZ 2000, which is used by the Germans. It's a very similar platform. It's just Polish developed, and they have recently received these and are already using them here on the front. Very nice to see that. You gotta love these very nice new Western toys getting ready to rain fire down on the enemy. So this is a large battery. This looks like actually a battalion of artillery guns. Normally a battalion is made up of 2 or more batteries of 4 guns apiece, 3 to 4 guns apiece. And so we're what we're seeing there is at least 2 batteries sitting there next to each other, ready to open fire on these locations. And the 155 shells, it's a NATO standard, and they are getting a ton of them, which we'll get into later, but they are putting them to very good effect. We've seen many strikes that are very precise and actually outranging Russian guns, allowing for a very effective counter battery fire. Highly mobile platforms like this make it a very difficult target for Russians to counter battery them, and the Ukrainians have better counter battery radar anyway, so they're able to detect detect when they're getting ready to be struck with counter battery fire, displace themselves, and move on to another firing location and continue the engagement. Ukrainian troops are shelling Russian lines on the outskirts of the city of Donetsk. Really, this area has not shifted very much since the beginning of the war. Both sides have been heavily entrenched in very static defensive lines on both sides, whether you're talking Russians and separatists or Ukrainian forces, since about 2014. Very static defensive lines. Think much more trench warfare in 1917. The lines are not shifting very much. You have minor gains and losses, such as the Battle of the Somme and Flanders and everything else, but you're not going to have a very huge major gains on either side within this region. The Russians are currently conducting offensive operations in and around Avdiivka, which they have been for some time, including quite extensive shelling. The Ukrainians seem to be shelling Russian positions outside of here. This is a very small suburb known as Abakumova, which is just a suburb of Donetsk. And shelling Russian static defensive lines on the outskirts of that little segment there. So we can take a look. And as you can see, those rounds coming in, these look like they are possibly Grads. Grads fire 40 round 122 millimeter Katyusha salvos. They're a saturation bombardment, but despite the fact they're dumbfire rockets, you can actually fire them in limited salvos as well. You don't have to fire all 40 at once. It looks like that's what has occurred. I'm seeing at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 impacts right there. Makes sense. That would be something I would expect out of a Grad, less so than I would expect from towed gun artillery. Steven Seagal is going to make a documentary film. He actually visited Olenivka, where the Russians massacred a bunch of Ukrainian prisoners of war. And right now, the thing is that Steven Seagal he was a U.S. movie star, Hollywood film star, very well known for his martial arts stuff, and he did like a live PD kind of thing earlier where he was a police officer, and I think Florida, which makes sense. But he's very pro-Russian. He's turned very pro-Russian. He actually had to flee the United States because he didn't pay crypto fines from the SEC, and he also has an ongoing sexual assault case that started in 2016. So he fled to Russia. He's very vocal about being very pro-Russian about this, and he's actually gone to Olenivka to make a movie. He's also been barred from entering the country of Ukraine since 2017. But yeah, he's there to, he's going to make a movie. Very interesting. Olenivka has been described as a concentration camp, by the way. If you couldn't tell by the look on those prisoners' faces. But here's Steven Seagal.
We are in Olenivka, as I've said, in the exact place where HIMARS came in, killed 50 people, wounded another 70 people. The interesting thing is that one of the Nazis that was killed is a Nazi that was just starting to talk a lot about Zelensky, and Zelensky being responsible for ordering torture and other atrocities that violate not only the Geneva Convention of War, but also are crimes against humanity. So if Zelensky was being implicated in crimes against humanity. I wonder if that's why this guy got rocketed and killed. So, if you look at the structure from the outside and the inside, it sure looks like a rocket or a missile to me. If you look at the beds and all of the stuff like that, this is certainly not a bomb. So, and not to mention that the Russian government now does have a lot of artifacts from the HIMARS.
So, we've got a couple comments about this, about Steven Seagal. So, first off, we have JL, who says, no easier way how to ruin your whole career. His career was already ruined. I think sexual assault allegations really don't do well, especially when you have to flee the country for them. And then Demise FPS says, "What I mean, quote, I mean, he was a shitty actor to begin with, so yeah, yeah. It you know, as like an 8-year-old kid, I liked Steven Seagal movies. It was, you know, kind of cool because, you know, martial arts, Bruce Lee. I'm 8 years old, and nothing's cooler than watching a dude get hit in the face with his own shotgun." Aravis Shang asks, is he blaming this on HIMARS? Yeah, he's blaming it on exactly what the Russians are telling him to blame it on. By the way, Steven Seagal, I don't think has ever spent a single minute in the military to know what a HIMARS strike would look like. I certainly have, and I certainly called in HIMARS, so I know what a strike looks like, and I know what the aftermath looks like, and that's not a HIMARS strike, my friend. If it was a HIMARS strike, the building wouldn't be there. So, just going to point that one out for you. The building wouldn't be there. And there wouldn't be any racks sitting up on their own. There wouldn't have been a large fire. This isn't a HIMARS strike. I hate to break that to you. It's not a HIMARS strike. There wouldn't be a building left if it was a HIMARS strike. But anyway, so yeah, Steven Seagal is being a shithead over here in Olenivka. Once again, I just want to point this out. Olenivka has been say that it's much more like a if you can't tell on these prisoners' faces, it's much more like a concentration camp. I mean, look at this guy back here. I mean, that doesn't look like he's doing very well. There's currently fighting on the outskirts of Vuhledar, which is a Ukrainian-held city here in the Donetsk Oblast, as we start moving our way across the southern front. They shelled the city as intense fighting is continuing on the outskirts. It seems that Russia is trying to see if they can probe the lines in other locations as well, and which is what we're seeing here. So apparently, also Steven Seagal said he wanted to change the mind, or he said that Riley has also stated this, and they said he also said that his film that he wants to make is to change how people view this conflict. Well, just call it a war, because that's what it is. You don't invade a country with 190,000 people and don't call it a war. We just technically, Vietnam was a police action. We just call it a war. Why? Regardless of how you feel about Vietnam, you can't surge that many troops into Vietnam and not just call it a war. Korea, also a UN police action. Believe it or not, it's not even technically a declared war. But we just call it the Korean War or the Forgotten War, depending on what you've grew up learning it as. But we just call it a war. You don't surge that many troops into a location and just not call it a war. Like, we just called it the war in Afghanistan. We didn't declare war in Afghanistan. We declared a war on terrorism, and we went to war in Afghanistan. We surged a shit ton of troops into Afghanistan. Iraq, we just surged troops into Iraq, and we called it a war. You can just call things a war. It's okay. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. Just call it what it is. Rooster Cyburn says, Riley, it's sad, but a certain audience will be receptive. Yeah, it really is. All because he's a American actor. It's frustrating sometimes. You ruined 8-year-old me's vision of you, Steven Seagal. You terrible, terrible human being. Mariupol has several developments. The leader of the DNR, Pushilin, confirmed that the DNR is planning to conduct tribunals of the Azovstal defenders after we saw them building cages inside of the theater. The theater stage with cages that we saw was already filmed and confirmed to be the location. It is believed that they will be sentenced to public hanging. This comes after guarantees during the surrender of the Azovstal of the Ukrainian defenders' safety and all of that wonderful stuff, just so that they would surrender the Azovstal, because they were going to fight to the death. And I do believe they probably would have. And at this point, considering how many have been sentenced and deported and put on really a sham of a trial, and just murdered and massacred, actually, in Olenivka, they probably could have just fought to the death, and I think it probably would have been a better outcome, honestly. Because the Russians certainly aren't keeping their end of the bargain, and I don't think anyone expects them to. But here is Pushilin.
Мариупольской филармонии. Здесь зал, где будет проходить суд над боевиками Азова. Вот за мной место, где будут находиться подсудимые. По вот этому вот зарешетчатому проходу они будут идти в клетку, а вот там на сцене будут размещаться судьи. Давай.
How fitting they build it on a stage, because it's all nothing but an act.
Yeah.
Here we go. They're gonna, there's Russian state media announcing tribunals here.
Якобы подготовки в Мариуполе трибунала над азовцами и другими военными преступниками в одном из залов монтируются клетки для подсудимых. Можете ли вы подтвердить подлинность этих кадров или опровергнуть? Ведется ли действительно подготовка к трибуналу? Как скоро он состоится?
Могу точно подтвердить то, что подготовка к трибуналу ведется, ровно так, как мы об этом заявляли, то есть ровно так, как мы это и планируем. То есть трибунал неизбежен, и да, один из первых трибуналов будет в Мариуполе. Готовимся по всем направлениям, в том числе готовятся и помещения.
So they're just talking about tribunals. Also, I want to point out, I love how they just pull like random clips from the war and just play it 24/7 behind the Russian news teams. That's all they do. It's just like random clips. Like, I don't even know who these guys are or what they're doing. It looks like a fake gear inspection of like some Chechen troops or something. Like, just 24/7, just crap. It's just literal garbage. There's even been Russian rock bands. There's been a Russian rock band that literally just they also describe it as crap, and they made a whole music video and wrote a song about it. But yeah, and another thing is, this is coming from one of our researchers, Fair, and they stated that, is this really living or is it just kind of existing? And you got to ask yourself that question. So here's some views of what Mariupol is currently looking like and what kind of being a citizen in Mariupol is like at this very moment.
Еще один дом. Здесь в этом доме живет 11 человек. Вот, парни договариваются о контактах. Здесь такой навес. А в соседнем доме прям очень много живет народа. Тут в конце сгоревшая техника стоит.
This city has been completely destroyed. And instead of rebuilding and giving people homes and electricity and water and, medicine so that way they stop dying, they instead want to hold tribunals. Already breaking agreements that they had made. Brokered through the UN and the International Committee of the Red Cross, by the way. We see some towed improvised rocket artillery being debuted here in Ukraine. Ukrainian forces have actually made their own MLRS rocket system, and they called it the Vedmok, which it fires. It's a grad system. Basically, they put it on a trailer. They took grad tubes, they put it on trailers so that way they can tow it behind a truck and launch grad rockets. Vedmok translates to Witcher in Slavic, so it's based off of The Witcher. TV series and all of that fun stuff. So, pretty cool looking though. Gives me some real World War II vibes. From like German rocket artillery during World War II. That's kind of the vibe that I get from this. Nope, got some copyright music in that. And, yeah, looks like we got more troops capturing a Vedmok here. So, it looks like both sides are at least employing these in some kind of a limited capacity. Look at all of them. Look at all those. Very nice. And they're all prepped, too. That's dumb. One good hit on this truck and it'd blow everything up for a quarter mile. But some advancements being made there. As we jump down here, there's more successful counter-battery fire on the part of the Ukrainians. Quote, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed a Russian anti-aircraft missile and gun complex, the Pantsir 1, S1, and an enemy 152 self-propelled howitzer, a 2S-19 Mista S in the south of Ukraine on August the 8th. And that's coming from Operational Command South. It's also HIMARS o'clock right now, because HIMARS seem to thrive at night. And under the cover of darkness, they set up their batteries and they launch a lot of these long-range precision strikes, which we can actually see happening here. So that it is HIMARS o'clock right now. Now, Riley pointed something out to me that I actually never noticed, but I think is very interesting and is worth commenting on. And Riley has said, have you noticed that Russians tend to show themselves in their videos and Ukrainians only show what is actually happening? Yeah, that is something that I've actually noticed. And it is kind of interesting to actually, because I've never had it pointed out, and to think about it. It's very true. The thing you have to know is that there's an information war ongoing in Ukraine. About the war in general. There's entire groups dedicated to trying fighting propaganda. You have to understand what is the narrative of any work that you're commenting on. and anything that you're trying to do. When we're doing this news, we're trying to do it in as unbiased and apolitical of a way as possible. And if we have a bias, we clearly state it. We've clearly stated it for Ukraine, because there's no way that we could, with any kind of a moral compass, support Russia in this. There's just no way. I've seen some pretty terrible stuff. I've seen some pretty terrible stuff that the Russians have done in my time, in person. Aleppo, absolutely just destroyed. But the level of destruction in Ukraine is just inconceivable. That's not to say that Ukraine's perfect. Ukraine has plenty of problems. Ukraine has plenty of problems that needs to be worked through. But that's not something that you need to fight a war over. And a lot of times when you see with propaganda, you look at propaganda from World War II is a really fantastic example of what reporting versus propaganda really looks like. Propaganda was showing, your guys fighting the action, talking about how all the heroic deeds that they're doing, destroying the Nazis, killing the Germans, whatever it was, destroying, really hardened defenses, in the Pacific. The Germans, it was, their valiant, their valiant defense against the Allied powers, or their invasion of the Soviet Union, and how the Russian troops were just stomping the Soviet Union, and the glorious defenders, the Iron Cross, mighty Third Reich, and all of that. That's what propaganda was. They filmed themselves doing all these really hard actions and really uptalk themselves, and you see that from the Russians right now. It's a very propaganda focused talk. Transition into Vietnam for the United States. And the United States reporters really had free reign. They could show whatever they want, film whatever they want. They were embedding themselves, and you get a very different reaction from the population, and a very drastic decrease. At the beginning of the war in Vietnam, 1965 through about 1968, 80% of the United States population backed U.S. troops being in Vietnam and fighting the North Vietnamese. But quickly that went downhill. Starting in about 1978 through about 1972, that basically flipped to about only 20%. So, very different style. If you show what's going on, that's actually reporting something. If you're just showing what your guys are, being awesome and doing all the time, that's propaganda. Ervis Xiang says, why did they disappear? The video. You're talking about the HIMARS missiles. So missiles are very complicated. I know I can speak intelligently about it to a degree with like anti-tank missiles. But the thing is that they have a couple of different stages with them. A lot of times these missiles, all they're doing is they have a launch motor, and then they have a flight motor, which they normally come in two stages. The launch motor gets it out of the tube and up to a certain height, and then the flight motor will kick in and actually take it onto its target. A lot of times these have, maybe two different types of propellants or two different levels of, heat that are coming out in order to really get it where it's going. And two, once they get up to a certain height, once they get up to a certain, MSL is what we would call it, they actually just use gravity to an extent. They just use their momentum and gravity to actually take themselves to the target. And when you're doing high angle fires like that, it doesn't take very long to get to your max MSL for the HIMARS. So I think there's a couple things that are working into that. I think it also could just be the way the propellant is burning. It's not burning, you're not having as bright of a flame there, but it just kind of seems to disappear, but it really doesn't. It's still on its way to the target. Jail said sad part is that even execution of those people wouldn't change what we think about them. They already crossed the line long ago. Like no matter what they do next, they can't be punished more. Yeah. And I think that's a very similar, probably, sentiment to people that, were around, like Holocaust survivors or people that were around, for the Holocaust, that saw the terrible things that happened to the Holocaust, and then the Nuremberg trials occurred. Is there a fate worse than death? Probably. But is life in prison enough? Well, I mean, that's a moral thing that you have to really ask yourself. And the right thing to do is say these guys need to rot for life in prison for the rest of their lives. I doubt that it's going to change anybody's minds about what they did. And the propaganda machine is definitely going to echo chamber that into existence. They're not going to be... I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of, I regret what I did from the Russian part if there is an international criminal court trial, unfortunately. And I don't think anyone's going to be satisfied. The amount of destruction and atrocities in Ukraine is just unfathomable. Unless you are there, unless you are there right now, even veterans of, say, the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, the fight against ISIS, it's unfathomable. If you fought in any of those, if you were in Operation Inherent Resolve, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, any of those, it's unfathomable to what you've seen. It is unbelievably more terrible than what you've seen. I cannot fathom it, and I thought I'd seen it all. So, it's incomprehensible, the level of destruction and atrocities. 17 of Ukraine's fallen have been repatriated. They did retrieve the bodies of 17 more of Ukrainian fallen troops today, and we put that over here in Zaporizhia because that's normally where those transfers do occur. So they were able to repatriate at least 17 bodies. To comment on the scorched earth tactics, well, they just kind of confirmed it. So this is from the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which is already in the news for a lot of different reasons. A lot of things about Russia maintaining it as a military base and Ukraine possibly shelling it. Ukraine says that the Russians shelled it by themselves in order to disconnect the lines, in order to link it up with Russian lines instead, and also blame it on Ukraine. Either way, Major General Valery Vasiliev, who commands the garrison at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, has stated, quote, "There will be either Russian land or scorched desert." Yeah, that's what you call a scorched earth policy. Another ammunition depot was hit. We just have more of these. It will just keep going. HIMARS are a thing, and the Russians keep bringing in ammunition. We can blow them up, or they can blow them up all day long. Ukrainians can just keep it coming. But another one was hit, according to the mayor of Melitopol. A lot of Russian equipment and troops have been destroyed as a result of this, but we can see that strike here. Yeah, if you can't tell and you can't hear, there's a lot of ammunition cooking off right now. Everest Chang actually commented and said, "Today is the day of cook-offs." Yeah, it is. There's some extra spicy fireworks coming up, no worries. Yeah, but you can tell, this is an ammunition depot. The reason you can tell that is, one, you can hear the cook-off of ammunition going off. That is a sure sign. That's a very good sign. Ammunition is going off. It's probably an ammunition depot. That's a large quantity of ammunition, and we know that it's probably a large quantity. We can see artillery rounds actually firing into the sky there. So, very good hit for them. Rooster Sideburns asks, how many soldiers must Russia be losing every day? That's a very, very hard question to answer. Russia hasn't been rotating troops very much. So we can safely say that Russian troops are sustaining losses and becoming more and more combat ineffective with some relative certainty, which is surges of fresh troops into the location, not even replacing the old ones, just keeping the old ones in the fight and just adding more on top of them. It's really hard to say. I would say that if Ukraine is losing about 200 a day, which is what President Zelensky has stated, they are losing about 200 a day, and that was earlier on, in way up by like Lysychansk and Severodonetsk were still ongoing. But if they're losing about 200 a day, it's safe to say that the Russians are probably losing 300 to 400 a day. The KIA, killed in action. And you'd probably, double or triple that and wounded in action as well. And it fluctuates day to day. I mean, it's not an exact science, but it is pretty close. And, for every 3 losses a defending force is going to take, they should be inflicting about 5 losses upon the enemy. So it kind of averages out. If Ukraine's taking about 200 losses a day, the Russians are probably taking somewhere between about 3 and 4. So pretty general in that. I'm not going to get too specific. That's not something that I was really taught to have to manage. That's much more a strategic level thing. Rooster Cyburn says Russia is certainly not telling, and they know the numbers. That's saying that Russian commanders are being honest. And that's also saying that Russia's actually keeping track. That's assuming a lot of things, and Russia isn't repatriating their dead. So I don't know if they truly do know how many killed in action they have. I'd say wounded in action is probably a better guesstimate for them. But still, battlefield reports are coming in constantly. It's going to be a long time before they truly know. It's a very tough, difficult question to answer on that one. But some relative certainty. I would say that the numbers that Ukraine is giving is very inflated. Rooster Cyburns actually asks, is it true more Russians died than Americans did in Vietnam? So like I was just saying, I think that Ukraine is very much inflating the numbers, which isn't uncommon. During Desert Storm, we actually killed the Iraqi army 7 times over, according to battlefield reports. So it's not uncommon for numbers to get inflated purposefully or not purposefully. But that's saying, and they even, advertised it, I saw earlier, where they're saying that the 90% of the invasion force that was contributed has been destroyed. 19% of the Russian army has been destroyed in Ukraine. I don't think that's true. If that was the case, the war would be over. And even if you went by the inflated numbers, which they're up to, I think it's about 42,000. They're estimating about 42,000 Russian troops have been killed in action. The U.S. lost 58,000 troops in Vietnam. So still not to that level yet. But even if the inflated numbers are actually correct, quite a large number of troops. You got to think Vietnam lasted almost 10 years. So a pretty large number of those killed in action. A very kinetic war regardless. It's a very kinetic war. The thing is that while war has become deadlier, especially for civilians, and the destruction much more easily, you're much more easily capable of committing wide-scale destruction than you were even in World War II, which is inherent to think. I have a hard time fathoming that, considering carpet bombing was a thing. What would have taken, weeks of campaigns, weeks of carpet bombing campaigns and, months, if not years of level of destruction, in World War II is taking literal weeks here. It's taking, Lysychansk lasted, 2.5, 3 weeks? The whole city of Lysychansk and the whole city of Severodonetsk are just destroyed. Rubizny wiped off the earth. Mariupol just destroyed beyond any hope of repair. Popasna, which was not that long of a campaign to take Popasna, didn't take but about, after probing attacks, it took maybe, a week and a half to take Popasna for the Russians. They actually did a fighting withdrawal, the Ukrainians did, out of there. So it's the level of destruction is inconceivable. But the losses are definitely, they're up there. I'd say they're definitely way up there, but not Vietnam level yet. Riley said, I saw something earlier that said 70 to 80,000 Russian troops have been killed so far. We won't know probably for years after the war ends. Yeah, exactly. We're not going to, for years, decades. We may all be dead by the time the Russians actually release that information saying Russia is still a country. So that's really the kind of level of destruction we're talking here. Russia has not even declared this a war yet. They very easily could declare this a war and just mobilize. I don't understand why they haven't yet, but their losses are definitely substantial enough that they're rendered combat ineffective in a lot of areas. I'll say that. I'd say all of the 15 battalion tactical groups that went into Ukraine in February are completely combat ineffective, if not totally wiped out at this point in the war. They have fielded their best stuff. It got wiped out, and they're literally scrambling to replace manpower losses and equipment losses, and it's not doing very well with that. Their logistical capabilities are strained on to the point of collapse, and we are seeing that unfold now as the Russian war effort has really lost all of its momentum.
Погнали, братики. Есть.
Well, that wraps up Melitopol there. And we can start working our way down. Oh, we're working towards the good stuff, folks. And let me tell you, so we had an ammunition depot destroyed in Melitopol. Now, this is I'm going to try and say this. Novolexivka in the Kherson Oblast. There's been an ammunition depot destroyed here.
БК на взлет, сука!
No, every time I see this, I just get the Boom Diata commercial from Discovery Channel stuck in my head. Yeah, so, as you can tell, it's going really well for them. And then we jump over here. This is Henichesk. Well, the base here in Henichesk was hit by at least 2 missiles about 5 a.m. Cameraman reports that ammunition storage and humanitarian aid storage were destroyed. 6 so far reported dead with the loss of a lot of vehicles. We can see that here.
Кочевник, не пались. Пизда, нахуй. Пацаны валяются. Прямо сюда.
Someone said that the cloud from the smoke looked like ET, and my immediate response for that is that, oh, looks like these are so close to getting the reports mixed up. But what I was getting ready to say is that, yeah, the cloud does look like ET, and the Russians need to phone home. Lots of explosions. It just gets better, folks, because we got some big news today. So first of all, we're going to jump over here. There's been another accident, by the way. The Russians need to stop drinking and driving. They really do. But yet another vehicle accident involved today. A Russian logistical vehicle. God, these guys suck. They can't even drive. How do you fight a war if you can't even drive? The Ukrainians damn near don't even have to fight to destroy the Russian logistics. They do it themselves. But the big news of the night, when it comes to Ukraine is here in Novofedorivka. And the big news of the night regarding Novofedorivka is the fact that they have an achievement unlocked now. The Ukrainians do. And if you didn't see the thumbnail of the video, there's now a new achievement for the Ukrainian forces. Deep strike. Destroy an enemy, or just hit enemy targets, at 200 kilometers or more using HIMARS. But here is the fact that the Ukrainians launched a strike 220 kilometers into Russian territory in Crimea. They destroyed this base. Over a kilometer away, vehicles were damaged and houses were damaged. Over a kilometer from the blast. To imagine the amount of equipment and stuff and ammunition and what was being held here is insane to think about. The explosions are massive. There's an IL-76, a Russian transport aircraft that is literally pushing it full throttle to just take off to get the hell out of Dodge. Apparently yesterday, reportedly a VIP aircraft landed at this base. Don't know how accurate that is, but yeah, it's just take a look. By the way, they're calling this incident, the Russians are, a refueling accident. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, in their official statement, said that they would like to remind everybody of the importance of fire safety and that you should not smoke in areas unless they are specified that you are able to do so.
Опа!
JL has stated, July 4th will never be as exciting anymore after we've seen happening to Russian ammo depots. I know, right? July 4th just isn't as exciting as it used to be. Demise FPS, damn saltpeter catching on fire again. I know, right? It's just unbelievably explosive. I mean, these are massive explosions. There's no way this is just refueling. It's just massive explosions. They said that there were no aircraft were damaged as a result of the blast coming from the Russians. We know that's not true. Just take a look. No aircraft damage. There's not much aircraft left to be considered damaged anymore. I just think you write that one as a combat loss. I mean, it's unbelievably destroyed. No casualties were reported. Taz later reported 6 injured and 1 dead. Oh man.
Поближе сделаем.
Wow. I mean, wow. And these are like reportedly like 800 to 900 meters from the blast site, by the way. These vehicles are. I mean, wrecked. Wrecked.
Посмотри, как ховало воткнуло. Сейчас. Прямо остановись, я пойду по... Насквозь. Слышь, хорошо там никто не сидел, блядь, да? Это насквозь. Это пиздец.
I want you to just imagine the power that took. That is unbelievable. Everything says, did Ukraine claim that they did that? No, Ukraine said that in their official report, which got posted by Ilya Ponomarenko, who is a independent reporter with the Kyiv Independent. He stated that the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense stated that that they would like to remind everybody regarding fire safety, because Russia is calling this a refueling accident. The Ministry of Defense said that they would like to remind everyone about fire safety after recent events in Crimea, and that they should only be smoking in areas which are designated for them to do so. And of course, President Zelensky, as we showed very early on here in the episode, up in Kyiv, said there's been a lot of talk about Crimea, as there should be, with a nice little smirk on his face. Much like Ukraine not immediately claiming the Moskva, I can't imagine that what they're doing right now is saying that they haven't done it, because they aren't denying that they did this. What they're doing, I believe, is they're currently waiting to see what the battle damage assessment is before officially releasing anything saying, yeah, we did this. So it's not an official, but it might as well be. JL, clearly photoshopped. No way it could have caused any damage to vehicles. It's not the only thing that I've seen written by JL regarding this. No. Rooster Sideburns, we're Steven Seagal when you need them. Someone said they're not, no aircraft were damaged, they're just built different. Oh my god. The memes off of this thing are going to keep me going for the next week. It's going to be fantastic. Man, some of the stuff I have seen is just unbelievably, like, just the one that we have. Just, I mean, look at the, who's there? Crimea who? Crimea River. Oh man, Taz. After they said that there were no casualties, 6 people were injured. They were taken to the hospital. 1 more died, according to the regional Ministry of Health. Yeah, so, oh man, this is, so it damaged civilian buildings a kilometer away. You have to wonder what the explosive was at the center of the blast. I mean, just take a look at these civilian buildings. These were over a kilometer from the blast site.
Везде, все дома, окон нету. И это в километре от Сакова, бля, от места взрыва. Что здесь? Что там, короче?
it's just building after building. It's just windows blown out. I mean, everything's torn off. Like, wow. Like, you got the power of the explosions is wow. So this is the layout of the airfield 2 days ago. So this is the layout of the airfield. As you see all those fighter jets. Wonderful Maxar satellite footage. I've got to love it. So all of that stuff just wrecked. And you can see the distance that these strikes had to travel. At a minimum, it's somewhere between 200 and 220 kilometers. So there's very few weapon systems that can fire that far and be accurate for a precision strike. And if Ukraine only has one homogenously, they only have one domestically that can do this. And I don't think we've seen them yet in this war. I got to do more research on it, but they have only one that I know of that is capable of doing this. And the other one is HIMARS. But HIMARS require a very special missile type the United States said that they were not going to give Ukraine that has a maximum range of 300 kilometers. Publicly has a maximum range of 300 kilometers. So, gotta wonder. JL says, considering that windows were broken so far from it, it could be comparable to the Lebanon explosion. I would say it's not as powerful as the Lebanon explosion. The Lebanon explosion was, Jesus. But that was huge. that was actually ammonium nitrate, and the size of that blast is very hard to, Rooster Cyburn saying attackums. Maybe. Maybe. I would, considering that we found out third party by here just in the community, we found that they were using HARMS missiles, and the U.S. had to admit that they had sent HARMS missiles to Ukraine. It wouldn't surprise me, even if they publicly said that they weren't going to, if they did send attackums. HIMARS on the raft, confirmed. There's a great meme that Fair posted about that in our staff channel when we were talking about this. But maybe, possible. I don't know, considering the control that Russia has of the Black Sea. Harpoon missiles definitely help that, but you still have some chances. And I don't know if I would put HIMARS in a raft, but I wouldn't rule it out. If they didn't get the attackums, they did it somehow. But that's... Wow. And there's no way Russia can just be like, nothing happened. There's no way they can be like, yeah, it was a refueling accident. First of all, if it's a refueling accident and no aircraft were damaged, you've already screwed up your own rhetoric. And there's no way that no one died in that. That's just impossible. Neo Plane Ticket says, so what is the best current guess? Partisans, false flag, which you can press easy puts, I doubt. Not partisans. I don't believe it was partisans. There's too much coming from the actual Ukrainians just in their demeanor. Now, they haven't officially claimed the attack. I want to make sure that's clear. The Ukrainians haven't claimed the attack. But from the way that Zelensky's talking about it, which the last time he acted like this is they sunk the Moskva. But the way the defense ministry's talking about it, their demeanor and the rhetoric that they're putting forth, this is a Ukrainian military strike. I know it has to be. Based off of just how they're, kind of leading it on, but not officially confirming it. Secondly, the possibility that Ukraine does have at least a limited quantity of the attackums to be able to conduct these strikes is... There's a lot the AGM-88 brought into question there, because the AGM-88 had never been acknowledged or talked about up until the point that we as the community discovered it, and it was posted on social media, and the U.S. had to come out and say, which we'll get to here later, that yeah, we did send it to them. Spoiler for a little bit later in the stream, but the fact that that now rules in, well, They were talking about it, that they might send them the ATACMS. Ukraine had requested them, and I wonder if maybe there might have been a limited number, as HIMARS ammunition has not been disclosed. The number or the variants has not been disclosed in any of the press releases. Whereas like Ukraine, they're talking about, we're going to send 75,000 rounds of 155 ammunition. They haven't specified what type of ammunition or how much HIMARS ammunition they are sending Ukraine. So it brings into question, there's a good possibility that the HIMARS may have conducted a strike, or like I said, there is one vehicle that I am aware of that Ukraine has domestically that can conduct this strike. I don't know if it would have been this accurate, though. We've seen a lot of weapon systems that they are good and they are long range, but they're not necessarily as accurate as, say, the HIMARS is. And this looks like it needed pretty surgical precision. HIMARS can put a round within 1 meter of its intended target. So there's some pretty good, I'm going to guess and say it was probably a HIMARS with an ATACMS that hit this base, if I had to take a guess. And it hit something very important, which caused sympathetic detonation, because the round itself, a HIMARS round itself, would not generate explosions that large. I'm going to guess and say they probably hit a lot of bombs that were stored and ready to go for use by the Russian Air Force. What has this done? Well, Crimea is a very big spot for tourism for Russians, and now it's backed up. The Crimean Bridge is completely backed up, and the Russian tourists are fleeing for their lives. We can actually see what's happening here right now.
Крымским мостом на выезд уже из Крыма скопилась огромная колоссальная пробка. Очень медленное движение. Стоим уже полчаса. Еще пока в Керчи даже, еще к мосту близко не подъехали, а пробка уже стоит, все.
So they're getting the hell out of Dodge, and JL brought up a quote for us, and the quote is, quote, "As you could understand, missiles with a range of 200 to 300 kilometers are already in our arsenal and are being used." And that's coming from former advisor to the head of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Viktor Adrasiv. So, once again, we're not openly confirming that we did this, and we're not saying what it is. But we have stuff that could theoretically do this. So it's certainly within the realm of possibilities. So, yeah, Ukraine blew up the base in Crimea. We're just waiting for the stamp of approval from the Ukrainian government. That's what's happening right now. That's all that's happening in Ukraine right now. We're just waiting on it. So that allows us to pop up finally out of Crimea, since there's been so much talk about Crimea. It's fantastic to see an entire Russian base just get wiped off the face of the earth. That's a huge strike, by the way. Once again, to those gunners on those missile systems. I applaud you, fine sirs. Or ladies, depending on who it is. But yeah, I applaud you, fine people who launched those missiles. You did a tremendous job. That wonderful team effort right there. Teamwork makes the dream work. Over here in Mykolaiv, it gets a little bit less uplifting, though. And the fact is that while it's great things are happening and deep strikes are occurring across the country, and there's been some pretty good stuff that Ukraine has done, the war is continuing and people are dying. As we can see here in Mykolaiv, Mykolaiv is under very harsh bombardment. This is coming in from us tonight. This was posted, nothing but a couple hours ago. And so there has been some pretty significant bombardments ongoing in Mykolaiv. We don't know the casualties. We don't know the damage. It's nighttime. We'll probably have more follow-ups regarding this tomorrow when they have time to actually take a look at what had happened tonight. But there is some pretty significant bombardment ongoing, and it is saturation bombardment, telling us these could be very well be grad systems or cluster munitions. And as you can see here, each of these flashes is an explosion. But you can see it's that saturation bombardment once again. And this has to be terrifying. This has to, I mean, I've been under relatively light shelling compared to what the Ukrainians right now are going through, and it's, I couldn't imagine this. You just look at the dust and everything is being kicked up by all of these. But this is some live footage from what's been coming in. So quite an extensive amount of bombardment ongoing here in Mykolaiv. Odessa, though, does have a little bit of uplifting news. The Russians continue to shoot cruise missiles from submarines located in the Black Sea. Surface vessels are too much at risk, especially after the Moskva. They've mostly relied on caliber cruise missiles that they've been firing from their submarine fleet in the Black Sea. Quote, in the Odessa region on August the 8th, Ukrainian Air Defense Forces shot down a Russian cruise missile, and that's coming from Sergei Barachuk, who is the spokesman of the Odessa Regional Military Administration. Hervis Sheng says if they have some kind of conscience, they should just cede their land and leave. Well, apologies, not their land, but the land they occupied. Well, like I said, Zelensky said it's going to finish where it all started, and that's with the liberation of Crimea, so we'll see it eventually. Right now, Russia's trading blood for time, and that's ultimately what we're seeing right now. Is Russia started this endeavor, they're continuing to double down because they can't back out. They're in too deep. Q sum 41. But there's not really a whole lot that they can do at this point. They are taking unsustainable losses. They're losing their logistical capabilities are absolutely crumbled. And they are cut off from the majority of the world. And there's not a whole lot that Russia is going to be able to do different going forward. It is an ever-evolving and very fluid situation in Ukraine, and it will be for some time as this war continues to drag on. Unfortunately, though, we're going to have to just watch and see how it plays out. There are still many developments to be coming, I'm sure, inside the country of Ukraine. But right now we get to move into the international news, which has had a lot of developments regarding Ukraine scattered throughout the globe. So as we continue into the news tonight, just keep that in mind. We have several different big developments happening out of the United States and across Europe. But, of course, we start off with our report regarding Russia. So Russia has stated it has finally recognized 2 more sailors have been recognized as having been killed. Russia's been relatively hesitant to admit any casualties regarding the Moskva, considering the fact that conscripts were actually on board the ship. Both, of course, now have been proven that they were lies. They said that no one had been killed aboard the Moskva, and that there weren't any conscripts fighting in the war. That is definitely no longer the case. We certainly know that is the case. The Russian Federation has officially confirmed it. So Leonid Savan and Ivan Frontin were the 2 sailors reportedly legally and officially recognized as killed on board the Moskva. Both of them were conscripts. At the moment, the death of 4 sailors from the sunken cruiser Moskva has so far been confirmed. As we jump up here, Finland is going to be sending troops to assist in training Ukrainian troops. This immediately follows Sweden and Canada, who have offered troops and will be deploying troops to the United Kingdom to assist in training new Ukrainian recruits as they go through NATO-style military training and expedited training program to really get them ready for the front lines and give them a safe place to train and learn valuable skills that will keep them not just alive on the front lines, but proficient and very efficient in combat and destroying enemy targets. But we do know that that Finland will be officially sending its forces over there to assist. So very good to see that. More countries pitching in for that training effort. A lot of HIMARS are on the road yet again here, and this time in Romania. We do not understand the exact circumstances causing this at this point in time, whether that's the war in Ukraine, which I certainly have part of it, as well as there's obviously stuff happening in Serbia regarding Kosovo that has been ongoing. It seems to have flared down a little bit, which is good. It simmered a little bit, but certainly NATO forces are kind of responding to multiple different situations within this region. HIMARS, we're not quite sure why they're moving or where they're moving to in regards to these ongoing geopolitical situations, but we do know that they are on the move once again. They're spotted over here in Romania. So you can go ahead and take a look at that. More copyright music, but there you go. Those are HIMARS batteries on the move. So NATO forces are deploying in some capacity. Man, that's a lot of HIMARS. Man, that's a lot of HIMARS. That's a lot of artillery that NATO's currently getting ready to bring to bear. For whatever reason. It's like an entire battalion plus of HIMARS that are rolling out here in all of their command vehicles. So quite an extensive movement ongoing there. Italy has a very interesting development. This is a 1,000 pound or 450 kilogram bomb that was found in the Po River. It's a World War II relic. It was live, and they actually, so it was discovered by a fisherman on July 25th near the northern village of Borgo Vigilio, which is near the city of Mantua. The bomb appears to have been submerged there for more than 70 years at this point. According to military experts, it is a 1,000 pound bomb. 3,000 civilians who live within the village vicinity were actually evacuated. They had military experts come in, cut the bomb's fuse, and move the device to a quarry about 30 miles or 45 kilometers away. And there they did a controlled detonation. There were no injuries or damages reported as a result of the explosion. But yeah, that's a big boy. That's a very, very big boy. JL, are ATACMS going to change the tide of the war? A 2015 report shows that 3.7 thousand pieces of MGM-140 were produced. How many could be delivered to Ukraine? I don't know. Something that is never my level is strategic. And when you start talking about, this is how many were produced, this is how many, the United States maintains a certain level that they have to maintain for prolonged conflicts. They have a certain stockpile level that they are required to maintain, and they must maintain. So that's why you see javelins and stingers slowing down until production catches up to produce more of them to replenish stockpiles. That's what you're seeing with Ukraine and the shipment of what weapons are going in what packages and why. That's what a drawdown is. It's pulling from our own stockpiles and giving it to Ukraine. But the United States has a certain level they must maintain, and that comes with every bit of ammunition and every weapon system and everything that they have in their arsenal of equipment. And so I don't know the numbers. They say 3.7, 3,700 missile system, missile ordnance was actually built and put into production. That number is the public official release information. I will tell you that if you see something, if you're seeing numbers and statistics for U.S. military hardware, or you're seeing, ammunition numbers or vehicle numbers, troop numbers, one, they're probably very general in their idea, in their spectrum. They're very general. They're not going to give those actual numbers. And two, they are also, generally speaking, the production and capability of weapon systems and ordnance is usually downgraded for public release, even if it's something for sale or not, and even if there are variances depending on on ranges, whether or not it's an exported munition or weapon system, or whether it's a domestic one. Even if there are differences, both of those usually are lowered for public knowledge, because you don't want to tell somebody who may be your enemy in the future exactly what you're capable of. It's operational security. It's long forethought there. That's why when it comes to some things about the Javelin system or the TOW system, I won't say anything about it on the stream. I do know how they, I obviously have to know how they work and everything like that, the Javelin system and the clue and all of that. There's a lot that you can find public release, including some publications on it, but once again, that some information is very much withheld. So I don't know. I don't know enough about the strategic level of that, but I can tell you, even if you are seeing numbers like that, to still be cautious. Those may be low and they may be outdated. I mean, you're saying that's from 2017. It's very well considering the fact that the United States is expanding its military makeup, especially the Marine Corps expanding rocket artillery and MRS systems, that more have been put in production since, especially considering that the United States has shifted since 2017 from fighting in counterterrorism operations to shifting back to fighting expectation of fighting near peer threats such as China and Russia. Though it looks like Ukraine is doing that for us, and a very good job at that point. It seems that Ukraine unfortunately drew the short straw. We aren't going into nuclear war over it, which is fantastic, but Ukraine is unfortunately very much suffering for that, and it's terrible to see. But Ukraine is... Russia walked into Ukraine thinking they were going to take it out in 72 hours. They're walking away with much more than a bloody nose. Up here in the United Kingdom, the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defense did actually publish a video of showing Ukrainian troops training there in the United Kingdom, and some interesting little details to note here that I'll go through once we watch the video through. But we'll talk about it here in a few moments. Until then, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the cool video. It's a cool little short clip, and what they're learning to do is they're learning how to operate in pairs. Everything can get upscaled, so you can. So it's bounding or buddy rushing, depending on which way you would have learned it. If you were in the military, you have bounding and buddy rushing is the same thing. One guy is firing, the other guy can move, and then vice versa. And you basically, walk yourselves up to the front. One guy will fire, the next one will move, he'll drop, he'll open fire, provide cover fire, the next guy will move. These are Ukrainians training in the United Kingdom. Yes, it is. Those are Ukrainians training in the United Kingdom. The guys that are assaulting the building are Ukrainian. They are brand new, fresh recruits. This is their first military training they've ever had. But they are buddy rushing in clearing this house. So they're learning two skills at the same time. They're learning how to clear a building properly, and there's an instructor from the United Kingdom or one of the other NATO allies, or soon-to-be allies, maybe, that is, acting as the attacking force. And what they're doing is this guy is opening fire. These two guys, they move up. They're going to assault the house. The guy on the left, he provides cover fire. His buddy moves. His buddy moves into a position where he can provide cover fire, right? And now the next guy can move. which you see in the background. Now this guy's starting to move up, and the instructor is following them. And he goes in here and he tosses a grenade in because they get around the house, and now this guy's just light sight line. And something interesting that he says, right? He says, "I'm up, he sees me, I'm down. I hate buddy rushing." I think everyone hates buddy rushing. But I'm up, he sees me, I'm dead. But the thing is that when he throws the grenade, you can see where the nuances are. Normally, he throws the grenade and says "granada," but normally when you yell "grenade," it means that there's an enemy grenade that has landed next to you, which is interesting. You normally yell "frag out" or whatever, similar context. You're sending a frag out, you're sending a grenade out towards the enemy. A grenade is landing next to you or friendly forces. Grenade. It's very simple, but a very different connotation, very different meaning. But they go through, they clear the house. A couple interesting things to note: the weapon systems that they're using. They're not using AKs. I believe this is the L80. I want to say this is the L82A2 or A3, which is the British service rifle. They're not using the AKs like they were in the first training sessions. Neo plane ticket. Where's the most training happening? The UK and Poland? I would say the United Kingdom and probably Germany. The United Kingdom is taking on 10,000 fresh recruits for Ukraine. They give them a safe place to train and also give them a NATO-style training, which is something their military hasn't had. They had training sessions with already military personnel, which is how they know how to use the Javelin and AT-4 and stuff, but they never got actual NATO training from the start, which is very different. Germany is where they're doing a lot of that. You're getting this new weapon system. We need to train you how to do it. HIMARS probably would have been trained in Germany. Artillery would have been trained. The M777s we know were being trained in Germany. The crews before they got those, they were being trained there in Germany. So that's Poland is on the front. They have their own issues. They're right there. They're right up against Belarus and Russia. They are one of the most likely places to be struck if the war escalates to include NATO. And there's already a lot of tension between Poland, Belarus, and Russia. So not a good place to put Ukrainians to train. They really need those guys not training Ukrainians if you're in Poland. They don't need NATO forces training in Poland. What they need them to be doing is holding the line and making sure that they're actually conducting military operations and in defense of NATO countries. Richard Sideburns, any news on when Finland is officially a NATO member? We don't know when it's going to happen. All 30 of NATO member states have to accept, including Turkey, have to accept and actually ratify NATO or ratify Finland and Sweden joining NATO. So we have an update regarding ratification process today, which we'll get to in a little bit later here, probably towards the end of the stream. But something very interesting to point out here is the fact that they're using the British service rifles. They're not using AKs, and that's a very interesting little detail. And they're using them effectively, which makes me wonder, especially considering they're using optics and everything else, if the United Kingdom is looking at possibly outfitting the Ukrainians when they send them back into combat. So that's something that may be a possibility. They're learning how to use the M67 fragmentation grenade, which is what you see them throw here. They throw the blue body frag grenade. It's an M67, or the British equivalent of that. It's getting tossed in there. But you have to wonder what all, on top of just the training that they're going to be getting, and a lot of that I think is showing in some of the details. Cool thing about buddy rushing like that is it can be upscaled. You can buddy rush between two people. 2 halves of a fire team, which is usually about 4 people, can buddy rush. 2 teams can buddy rush with each other. So one team provides cover fire, the other team moves. That can be upscaled. So that's the squad size. Platoon size, squads are buddy rushing with each other. Companies can buddy rush with each other. Battalions, regiments. So it upscales. Divisions can technically do it if you get to that scale, which is about the biggest scale you can get to. Technically, corps inside of an army. So if you're having like a large army and you have multiple divisions in a corps, you can do that too with different corps even. So it's small. A lot of things with military tactics are very small, and you upscale them as need be with whatever situation you find yourself in. So valuable tactics. Update down here as we start to move ourselves here into the Middle East. We have an update regarding Jerusalem and I should say Israel and Palestine. Sorry, not Jerusalem itself, but Israel and Palestine, which have been in a heated conflict over the last few days. A truce and a ceasefire was declared, and there has been talks inside of Egypt to try and settle those differences. But in the meantime, the Israeli Defense Forces did kill at least 3 more Palestinians in a counterterrorism operation there in Palestine. During the counterterrorism operation on the west bank of the Jordan River, Israeli Special Forces eliminated the field commanders of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade and Islamic Jihad. The operation took place in Nablus, where the suspects were hiding in one of the residential buildings. When offered to surrender, the militants responded with gunfire. During the shootout with security forces, 3 Palestinians were neutralized. It is noted that about 60 people who tried to support the blocked militants were injured. There is no casualties among the IDF soldiers, according to the Israeli Ministry of Defense. The liquidated were wanted organizing terrorist attacks in the region. Man, I would be tired. I would be so tired. That's a lot of running with a lot of gear, man. No. So it looks like some of these may get a little more graphic, so I'm gonna probably avoid the rest of these videos. You can always check out all of these points on our website. We have all of the maps uploaded there daily. So you can check out, I do it before the stream. So you guys can always check out these maps if you want to check out more of the videos and stuff that we don't necessarily show here on the channel. But just to make sure we're not getting into anything too graphic, I'm just going to kind of steer clear. But you get the idea. There was a counterterrorism operation there, and 3 Palestinians were killed as a result. Over here in Kabul, an explosion injured 10, or explosion kills or injures about 10. At least that's according to the locals. In the 1st District of Kabul, Islamic State militants blew up a bus carrying local Shiites, as a result of which 10 people were killed and injured. According to the UN report, the UN reported that the result of the 2 previous attacks by the Islamic State in the capital of Afghanistan, 120 Shiites were killed and wounded. But you can see that the Islamic State did take responsibility for that attack. So I'm going to update that color over to black, because that's what we mark the Islamic State as. Over here in the northern part of Pakistan, 4 military personnel were killed in a suicide bombing. This happened in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the Pakhtunkhwa area, killed 4 military personnel of the country's armed forces. 7 more, including 2 civilians, were also injured. The gunman detonated an explosive-laden rickshaw near a military checkpoint in northern Waziristan. No one has yet taken responsibility for the explosion. I'm going to guess and say it's probably the TTP, or the Tehrik al-Taliban Pakistan, which is the main group that the Pakistan is currently fighting with.
ये किस यूनिट की गाड़ी है भाई? ये किस यूनिट की गाड़ी है? अच्छा, ये जगह सर यहाँ पे एक्सीडेंट, ये सुसाइड हो गया। चिंची रिक्शे पे बंदा है और यहाँ से होती हुई हमारी गाड़ी सर पीछे तकरीबन 30 मीटर तक दूर जाके नीचे गिरी है। ये चिंची रिक्शा है, इसको भी आग लगी हुई है।
So Yeah, obviously, pretty devastating explosion there. In Bangladesh, there are large protests over spiked fuel prices. Pretty large-scale rallies across the country is due to 50% increase regarding fuel prices. Angry demonstrators have surrounded gas stations across the country, demanding an unexpected price increase to be canceled. The protesters did end up clashing with police. So, obviously, it's pretty devastating for them. We don't know of any casualties or injured or anything. Bangladesh is already kind of suffering underneath everything ongoing, and so a 50% price increase regarding their fuel is a pretty substantial increase to them in an area that's already kind of struggling. We jump over to Taiwan, where Taiwan has announced the resumption of flights and shipping. Since August 7th, more than 30 ships, have already been recorded that have passed through the Chinese Navy's exercise zones. On the morning of August the 8th, gas carriers and oil tankers arrived at the Quay Walls in Taiwan, which had been anchored for several days before that, not daring to approach the ports. Moreover, Taiwan announced its own military exercises with live firing of heavy artillery for Tuesday and Thursday. So, pretty cool. Obviously, Bloomberg is reporting on that. Oh, China. China has detected a new virus in 35 people. They found a new infection, the Lanyan Hanipha virus. According to local media, at least 35 people have already become infected with it in 2 separate provinces. The virus causes fever, cough, anorexia, myalgia, nausea, and vomiting. According to scientists say that Lingya is similar to the Nipah virus, one of the most dangerous viruses in the world, which is characterized by an inflammation of the brain and respiratory diseases. There's no cure for Nipah, and its mortality rate ranges from 40% to 75% of those infected, meaning 40 to 75% of those infected will die of the virus. Scientists don't know if Lanya can be transmitted from person to person. None of the 35 patients have had any close contact with each other and have been found to have a common point of exposure, suggesting that the virus has been sporadic in humans at this point. And if you want more updates regarding that, you can check out Newsweek. Does have an article regarding it. Seoul, South Korea was hit with flash floods, leaving at least 8 dead and 6 missing after the heaviest rain in decades, which hit the capital. Pretty tremendous flash floods throughout the area. There's been a lot of very significant weather. Russia, Ukraine, the United States, Africa, here in Southeast Asia have had some pretty tremendous, very extreme weather that has occurred this year, and it's kind of startling to see. And scientists so far are attributing to a lot of this to actually climate change at this point. So go ahead and take a look. So I don't know if you noticed, but the police car is completely what happens when the police are submerged? Like, who do you call for help? These guys, they're submerged in the water. That's terrifying to think about. I'm good. That looks bad to go. That looks very bad to go for me. But yeah, pretty insane amount of rain that hit. That unfortunately hit Seoul there. And unfortunately, once again, 8 people did lose their lives and 6 more are currently missing. Let's move here into Africa. Mozambique, as the Islamic State has said that they will continue fighting. They published a video saying they will continue the war until Sharia law, which we'll get into here in a second, is fully established in the country and its current government is overthrown. Basically, they want to instill the Islamic State Caliphate in Mozambique. The Caliphate that was in Iraq and that was in Syria, that I had the wonderful time of really enjoying. I can't tell you it was a lovely place because I'd be lying. But they're wanting to overthrow the government and turn it into a caliphate. Sharia law is a body of religious law that forms part of the Islamic tradition. It's derived from religious precepts of Islam and is based on the sacred scriptures of Islam, particularly the Quran and the Hadith. It's for a lot of it. They say it's not based off of based upon interpretation. But every group, the Taliban does Sharia law very different than, say, the Islamic State will. They have very different levels of maintaining that, and it is up to interpretation of whatever group is overseeing it. But they did release a video here in Mozambique saying that they will be fighting on until the end, and we have no doubt that they will continue to do that. They have had some successes over the military inside of Mozambique, so it's a very concerning situation. In Mali, the Islamic State killed many security forces and civilians. 4 military personnel and 2 civilians were killed. Several more people were injured, according to eyewitnesses. Having dealt with the security forces, the militants seized a settlement and detained and took away an unknown direction, while the tribal leaders who collaborated with authorities. The Ministry of Defense of Mali claims that the military neutralized the threat and eliminated 5 attackers. Responsibility for the attack is placed currently on the Islamic State operating within the region. The Defense Ministry of Mali, during the attack of militants by the Islamic State, killed 17 soldiers and 22 were injured, and 9 more are currently missing, most likely captured, as well as a number of vehicles which were destroyed, material damage that was caused to the attacking or by the attack. In general, attacks such as this one are considered major, so it remains we have to kind of wait for official statements from the Islamic State probably regarding this, but it's very common. There's many groups fighting currently within this region, but the Islamic State is probably the most likely candidate, and there is that official report from the Defense Ministry and the military junta of Mali. Jump over here, and we actually come back to the Alcaparraso mine, also known as the Lunden mining mine here, about 665 kilometers north of Santiago here in Chile. It's a giant sinkhole which appeared on July 30th. At the moment, the funnel has reached a width of 50 meters and deepened to 200 meters. The Geology and Mining Service said that it had installed water intake pumps at the mine and would inspect the mine's underground chambers for possible overmining of copper over the next few days, checking in on safety and seeing what the cause of the sinkhole may have been. Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's a big one. That's a big sinkhole. I've seen some big sinkholes. I don't think I've ever seen one that big, though. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. There's many different causes of a sinkhole, but it looks like that one may have been caused by overmining underneath it and destabilizing the earth to where it ends up collapsing in upon itself. Up here in Cuba, just to the east of Havana, here in Manzanas of Cuba, an oil storage hub which have had a huge fire which has been raging. It continues to burn. The fire has not been extinguished for the past 4 days. One of the tanks exploded overnight, and it became known that the local energy minister was injured in the fire. Cuba is currently asking for international help in order to extinguish the fire. They're having a very difficult time trying to maintain the blaze at this point.
Mi madre, mira cómo se iluminó todo, mira esto. Ay, Dios mío, mira, se va a reventar todo. Ay, la gente que está ahí, por Dios. Dios, Dios.
So quite a significant blaze ongoing there. And Washington, D.C. has had several major developments. First of all, the HARMS missile was confirmed. The HARMS missile that we talked about on Sunday is the AGM-88. The HARMS missile, it's a air-to-ground missile that can be fired. That you use to destroy radar. It's an anti-radiation, anti-radar missile. It was confirmed to have been used. The community here on the internet is the one that really tracked it down through social media, and we showed it here on the stream. And the United States basically had to come out and say, yeah, we shipped it, because the United States is about the only people that use it. How they use it is still up for debate. A lot of people suspect it's probably Soviet aircraft that went under NATO modernization that can marry up with NATO aircraft or NATO ordnance. And Secretary of Defense for Political Affairs Colin Kahl said in a briefing that the U.S. had sent several missiles, and they added that they could hit Russian radars and other targets. So they did confirm the HARMS was from the United States and did come in that security package. Once again, something that was not known and not declared. Not that I expect them to declare everything that we're sending, because that's very, very poor operational security to do so. But that does definitely leave the open option that maybe the ATACMS, at least in a limited quantity for HIMARS strikes and other requested materials that Ukraine could be utilizing, that would be very beneficial to them, may have also been sent, and nobody has just yet to find out about it. So, but yes, the United States did confirm that. Here at the White House, we have three major developments. First of all, visa restrictions are being imposed on 100 different Belarusians linked to Alexander Lukashenko's regime. So that means that they will no longer be able to get visas and travel at least to the United States. So there are visa restrictions on Lukashenko. Belarus and Russia are actually in a union together. In fact, they're trying to basically become one nation, much like the Soviet Union. They have been like that for some time, though there's not a whole lot that they do together as of right now. Basically, Belarus is just a puppet state of Russia. It's the Soviet Union, except it's only two countries, and Belarus is one of them, which doesn't exactly mean a whole lot. But yes, that's something the United States is doing. Also, a $1 billion aid package, security aid package, is going to Ukraine. That was also confirmed and sent out by the United States. First of all, we have a third party reporting on this as well, Christopher Miller here, who went through everything that's being said. But we actually also pulled from the Secretary of Defense himself. So the official immediate release on this, $1 billion in additional security assistance for Ukraine. It will include, but is not limited to, by the way, additional ammunition for the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, or HIMARS, which, once again, is not specified the types or the amounts, 75,000 rounds of 155mm artillery, 120mm mortar systems, and 20,000 rounds of 120mm mortar ammunition, which is actually considered an artillery piece by the Marine Corps doctrine. It's considered a mortar piece by the U.S. Army. And munitions for National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems, or NASAMS, 1,000 Javelin, and hundreds of AT-4 anti-armor systems. The Javelin is an anti-tank guided missile system. It's a medium anti-tank guided missile system. Very, very effective. There is no counter. There is no counter to the Javelin. For those that may not know. And then the AT-4 is a dumbfire 84mm rocket with a high explosive anti-tank warhead. 50 armored medical treatment vehicles, probably the medical variant of the M113 armored personnel carrier, as well as could also be MRAPs or other vehicles. Claymore anti-personnel munitions, the Claymore mine. They will not be They will not be self-triggerable. The United States doesn't maintain the ability, or I shouldn't say that. The United States did not sign the Ottawa Convention banning landmines, anti-personnel mines, and self-triggering mines, but the United States still abides by it. So we still use clackers and detonation cord and all that stuff where we have to manually detonate them. So I suspect that's what will be sent. C4 explosives, demolitions munitions, and demolitions equipment. Fantastic. Blow a lot of stuff up. Everyone loves explosions. And then medical supplies, including first aid kits, bandages, monitors, and other equipment. You need to save lives too. There's no point in dying for your country. You make the wise words of Patton when played by from the famous movie Patton. I'll just leave it at that because I can't remember the actor's name. But in those famous words in the opening speech to the movie Patton. You don't win by dying for your country. You win by making the other poor bastard die for his country. Riley says Paul loves his javelin. Bet your ass I do. I love my javelin. I had so much fun. It was a fantastic job. Fantastic job. I love blowing stuff up. It's amazing. The javelin's it's a fascinating weapon system. The technical documents for it is absolutely dull. And going to school, and when I was in my MOS training for it, there's some dull moments in there, definitely. But it's a really, really cool weapon system, especially when you get into the specifics on how it works, and you're sitting there and you're like, wow, that is just absolutely ingenious on how that works. But that's most of that stuff I can't tell you about. So just know it's a very fascinating weapon system, and there's nothing that can counter it at this point in time. And that you can run, you can hide, but javelin will catch up to you. You can lock onto people with that thing in a window. You can use it to put a missile through a bunker window. You can also shoot down helicopters with it, in case you didn't know. Anyway, moving on from that. Biden has also signed the Instruments of Ratification. The United States Congress, specifically the Senate, ratified the accession of Finland and Sweden into NATO. The United States will be ratifying it. That is another hurdle for Finland and Sweden to join the NATO alliance. That is yet another country on the list that has ratified. We have not been keeping track on who all has ratified it. I don't know. I haven't seen anything that NATO has put forth on who has ratified and who has not. Turkey, I believe, is one of the last ones. I don't believe there's very many left. But that means that Finland and Sweden will be joining NATO, at least according to the United States. So we have this is a almost 10-minute video.
Thank you, please.
So, current count. The number of NATO members that have ratified Finland and Sweden's accession, we're sitting at 23 out of 30. 23 out of 30 are left. We have Portugal, Spain. We have Portugal, Spain. If I could move the Czech Republic. Slovakia, Hungary. Greece, if I can get it on there, and Turkey are the last ones that have not yet ratified. Is there another one in there? Nope, that's all Greece. Yep. Okay, so that's what we got. We have 7 left. 7 NATO member states left for Finland and Sweden to join NATO. So there's your answer. Sorry I didn't have that answer. Thank you, Riley. Thank you very much. But that is it for all the major news, and now we get into some of the cool stuff. So we have a couple of different things. So the first thing is that gold and jewels have been recovered from a 366-year-old shipwreck. What this is a Spanish shipwreck. It's a galleon. And the efforts, in an effort to conserve what's left of the ship and its prize cargo, the international team of preservationists and underwater archaeologists have been working to recover objects from this shipwreck, which sits at the on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, about 43 miles off the coast of the Bahamas. the Nuestra Senora de las Maravillas, or the Our Lady of Wonders in Spanish, an 891 ton or 808 metric ton, 808 metric ton galleon was traveling between Spain and Colombia in 1656 to pick up cargo of silver when a navigational error caused it to collide with another vessel in the Spanish fleet. The accident forced the ship to run aground on a coral reef. An estimated 600 of the 650 on board died in the sinking. To help to protect the remains, the Allen Exploration, or Allen X, an organization that specializes in finding historical shipwrecks, has partnered with the Bahamian government to recover what's left of the ship and its cargo. Over the past 2 years, Allen and his team were able to recover a number of items from the shipwreck, including the last remnants of the ship itself, a stone ballast, iron fasteners, and at one time held the hull together in a wing nut. The iron fasteners that at one time held the hull together in a wing nut from the bronze navigational instrument called the astrolabe. So really cool, really cool. Spanish galleons are highly sought after. I don't think there are very many left to be discovered that sank, but the treasure within them is worth quite literally billions of dollars. So it's very controversial regarding picking up this stuff. Part of it's morally. First of all, 600 of the 650 crew members died, so it's technically a grave. Secondly, this was all pillaged and minted by usually slave labor in the New World and the exploitation of the native population and colonization. You also have the Bahaman, whoever discovered it, the shipwreck, the treasure hunter who discovered it. They would like a piece of that, at the very least, a sizable chunk for their time and effort to find this. Secondly, the Bahamas would love it because that's a lot of money. And of course, Spain, knowing it's a lot of money, would like to lay claim to it because it's their ship and they minted that treasure when they were colonizing the New World. So there's a lot of controversy around that kind of stuff. But at least this stuff is going at least into preservation and archaeology. So it's better than just like Ecuador and somebody fighting over it, which is great just because they want the treasure. We jump over here north of Papua New Guinea, where astronomers plan on fishing an interstellar meteorite out of the ocean using a giant magnet. So astronomers are planning a fishing trip right now, and it's an extraterrestrial interloper on Earth. It's a small meteorite from another star system that crashed into the Pacific Ocean with the energy equivalent to 121 tons or 110 metric tons of TNT. The team from Harvard University hopes to find fragments of the interstellar rock, known as CNEOS 2014 TAC 1, TAC 8. I'm going to guess and say that means that it landed, which slammed into the Earth on January 8th, 2014. Measuring just 1.5 feet wide, the CNEOS it now appears to have been the first interstellar object ever discovered in our solar system. It is thought to be from another star system because it was traveling at 37.2 miles per second or 60 kilometers per second relative to the sun, too fast for it to be bound by the sun's gravity. If you want to have more information on this, you can go and check it out over at Live Science, where they have a full article on this. But that's actually all of the news in the world for the night. There's a ton of stuff that has been happening, a lot of big updates for Ukraine, a lot of aid packages going out and grants, and a really, really, really spicy explosion in Crimea. Very spicy, extra zesty explosion in Crimea. There's a lot of stuff that's been happening, a lot of really big developments throughout the world, and I'm sure that the developments are just going to keep rolling. I hope that you guys have enjoyed, the news tonight, and that you guys have had a little bit of a laugh and a little bit of fun with this, even though a lot of what we talk about is kind of a dark and depressing topic, which is why we do take Mondays off. Take care of your mental health, guys. It's very important, more important than you may realize or think. But the great thing about this community is the fact that you guys have allowed us to be the news that gives back, and we can give back directly to a lot of what we're talking about here on the channel. A lot of these really depressing and dark things that are happening, well, we can help with them. And you guys have been awesome at supporting us, and I can't thank you enough for that, and I can't thank you enough for supporting the great organizations that we have supported in the description. So if please go and check them out, go check out the description, and go check out all of the different organizations we have listed there. 80% or more of them actually, their donations actually go to the programs. So it's pretty fantastic. We're actually going and helping people. We're not trying to pay salaries or anything. And if you have more, we're constantly looking to add to the list. So our Discord's in the description too. Go and jump on there. You can enjoy the community. We have a wonderful community on there, very active community. There's constantly, I can't keep up with the conversations on there. So much stuff getting posted. And let a staff member know on there, and shoot us a link to the organization and a short summary about them. We'll go through the vetting process and try and get them added. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, then give us support and help us grow this channel. Because the more people that are here and come here and enjoy the news the way that we do it, obviously the more that we're all happy about our endeavors, but even more importantly, the more of an impact that we're going to have on these organizations and raising money to help people throughout the world, which is really what this whole project's about. And the staff have been amazing in this project, and there's no way that we could do it without the rest of the staff. I just lend the voice to this project. But we're never doing super chats. We're never doing any kind of merchandising. That's something that me and all the staff agreed on collectively. We're never doing that. We're not here to profit off of people's misery. We're here only just to help people throughout the world and report the news in a more sensible way, at least in our opinion. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed. I hope that you guys will be joining us once again tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time and 9 p.m. Central. Please be safe. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. But please make sure to show some love and affection to the organization in the description. Let us know if you have one that we could be able to vet. And once again, I hope to see you guys back once again tomorrow night. Please be safe. Have a wonderful Wednesday. Congratulations. You made it halfway through the week. And hopefully we'll be talking to you once again tomorrow. So with that, have a fantastic rest of your night, guys. My name is Paul from the New News.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять умовно і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлепуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріля до волновахи, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям скин плечом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріля до волновахи, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your number 11, shove it up your wrinkle bomb. I will come and help you fit it in your skull.
Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріля до волновахи, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріля до волновахи, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріля до волновахи, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо нахуй!